Imagine an entire people, thousands of them. They have languages, songs, gods, and grandparents who remember stories from 100 years before. They have ways of doing things that took 1,000 generations to perfect, and then, within a span of time shorter than a single human life, all of it is gone. Not conquered, not absorbed. Erased. No descendants, no record. Nothing left but a thin layer of ash or bone in the ground for someone to dig up 20,000 years later and wonder what happened. For most of human history, this wasn't rare. Whole populations vanished, and almost no one was left to remember them. We tend to think of human history as a steady climb upward, but the real story is full of dead ends, near misses, and total wipeouts. Here are 10 prehistoric disasters that ended entire peoples, and in a couple of cases, very nearly ended us. Number 10. The Toba supereruption. Around 74,000 years ago, on the island of Sumatra, a volcano didn't just erupt. It detonated. Toba released thousands of times more material than a normal eruption, blasting so much ash and sulfur into the sky that it blocked the sun across much of the planet. Temperatures dropped, plants died. The cold may have lasted years. Some scientists argue this is the moment humanity almost ended. There's evidence that the total human population crashed to just a few thousand breeding individuals, a genetic bottleneck so tight that you, every person alive today, descend from that tiny group of survivors. Whole branches of early humans living closer to the eruption likely vanished entirely. We don't know their names. We never will. But we are the cousins of the ones who barely made it through. Number 9. The Younger Dryas. Roughly 12,900 years ago, the world was finally warming out of the last ice age. Humans were spreading, thriving, settling into a kinder climate. And then, almost overnight in geological terms, the cold came roaring back. Within a decade, temperatures in the north plunged back toward ice age levels and stayed there for over 1,000 years. This wasn't a slow shift people could adapt to. It was a slammed door. The herds that hunting cultures depended on collapsed or moved. Plants that had just become reliable food sources failed. Across the northern hemisphere, ways of life that had worked for thousands of years simply stopped working, and the people who practiced them either changed completely or disappeared. Some researchers believe the desperation of this period is exactly what pushed humans toward farming, a disaster that may have invented agriculture. Number 8. The Clovis collapse. In North America, around 13,000 years ago, there was a remarkably successful culture we now call the Clovis people, known for their beautifully made, distinctive stone spear points found across the continent. For centuries, they hunted the giant animals of the Ice Age: mammoths, mastodons, giant ground sloths. Then the points vanish from the archaeological record. The Clovis way of life ended, and it lines up almost exactly with the Younger Dryas cold snap and the extinction of the giant animals they hunted. When the megafauna died out, the entire culture built around hunting them had nothing left to stand on. The people didn't all die, but the Clovis world, their tools, their hunting traditions, their entire way of being, was erased and replaced. Number 7. The Doggerland drowning. Between Britain and mainland Europe, there once stretched a vast, rich lowland we now call Doggerland. Rivers, hills, marshes teeming with game. For thousands of years, hunter-gatherers lived there. It was, by some estimates, some of the best real estate in Ice Age Europe, and it was home. As the Ice Age glaciers melted, the sea rose, slowly at first, swallowing the coastlines year by year. Families would have watched familiar hunting grounds turn to marsh, then to sea. And then around 8,200 years ago, a massive underwater landslide off Norway sent a tsunami crashing across what remained. The final pieces of Doggerland went under. An entire landscape full of people and their history is now seabed, its tools and bones occasionally dragged up in fishing nets. A whole world drowned. Number 6. The Storegga tsunami. That same Norwegian landslide deserves its own place on this list because of how brutally sudden it was. Picture a coastal community on a normal day. Children playing, food drying, boats pulled up on the shore. They have no concept of what is coming, no warning system, no word for tsunami. The Storegga slide displaced an unimaginable volume of seabed and sent waves estimated at several meters high, smashing into the coasts of Scotland, Norway, and the remnants of Doggerland. For low-lying coastal foragers who depended on the shoreline for survival, a wall of water arriving without warning would have wiped out entire settlements in minutes. There was no rebuilding for many of them. The sea took the people and the memory of them in a single afternoon. Number 5. The Green Sahara's death. This one is the opposite of a flood. Around 10,000 years ago, the Sahara was not a desert. It was green. Lakes, rivers, grasslands. Herds of animals and thousands of people who left behind stunning rock art, showing cattle, swimmers, and a lush world that seems impossible to us now. For millennia, the Sahara was a thriving home. Then the rains began to fail. Slowly, over centuries, the Green Sahara dried out and became the largest hot desert on Earth. The lakes shrank to dust. The herds died or fled. The people who had built a whole culture around that water had to abandon it entirely, scattering toward the Nile and the coasts. The civilization of the Green Sahara didn't get conquered. It got buried under sand, its painted walls now staring out over an empty desert. Number 4. The Black Sea Flood. Thousands of years ago, the Black Sea was, according to one major theory, a smaller freshwater lake, well below the level of the Mediterranean, ringed by fertile land where people farmed and lived. Then the rising Mediterranean breached the natural dam at the Bosphorus. What followed in this scenario was catastrophic. Seawater poured through the gap with the force of many waterfalls, and the lake's shoreline expanded outward, possibly a mile or more, per day, for months. Farmland, villages, and homes disappeared under brackish water that kept rising. The people living on those fertile shores had to flee in every direction, and some researchers suspect the memory of this disaster echoes in the flood myths told across many ancient cultures. A real catastrophe, possibly remembered as a legend, long after the people who survived it were gone. Number 3. The megafauna extinctions. This isn't a single event, but a rolling catastrophe that reshaped human life everywhere. As humans spread across the globe at the end of the Ice Age, the giant animals began to vanish. Mammoths, giant kangaroos, car-sized armadillos, ground sloths, the size of elephants. Across continents, the megafauna died out, through some combination of climate change and human hunting. For the human cultures built entirely around these animals, this was the end of the world. Every tool, every story, every seasonal rhythm of life was tuned to creatures that no longer existed. When the mammoth went, the mammoth hunters went with it, not always as bodies in the ground, but as a way of life erased and forced to become something else, or vanish. An entire category of human existence, the great beast hunter, was deleted from the planet. Number 2. The Thera eruption. Now we reach the edge of recorded history. Around 3,600 years ago, the volcanic island of Thera, modern Santorini, erupted in one of the most violent explosions in human history. It blew the center out of the island and sent tsunamis racing across the Mediterranean. The Minoans, one of the most sophisticated early cultures in Europe, lived on nearby Crete and the surrounding islands. Their coastal towns, fleets, and trade networks were hammered by the eruption and the waves that followed. While the Minoans didn't vanish overnight, this disaster is widely seen as the blow that cracked their civilization, leaving them weakened until they faded from history. A culture of palaces, plumbing, and beautiful art knocked off its feet by a single mountain. Many believe this is the true origin of the legend of Atlantis, a great island civilization swallowed by the sea. Number 1. The Doggerland of us all. The lost peoples will never know. The number 1 disaster isn't one eruption or one flood. It's the realization underneath all of these. For every catastrophe we can name, there are countless others we can't. Whole languages spoken by thousands of people, gone without a single word surviving. Entire cultures with their own gods and music and inventions erased so completely that not one trace remains for us to find. We only know about the disasters on this list because they were big enough, or recent enough, to leave a mark. But human beings have been around for hundreds of thousands of years, and for almost all of that time, when a people died out, they died out silently. No monuments, no records, no mourners left to remember them. The true scale of human loss across prehistory is simply unknowable, an ocean of vanished lives with no shore. So here's the thing to sit with. We tend to imagine ourselves at the top of a long, safe staircase, with all of history neatly leading up to us. But that's not what the ground shows. The ground shows ash layers and drowned coastlines and abandoned cities and people who were every bit as real, as clever, and as alive as you, who simply ran out of luck. Every one of those vanished people surely believed, like we do, that they were permanent, that their world would go on. They had no idea they were living in the last chapter. And the honest, uncomfortable truth is that we have no way of knowing whether we are living in ours. The same forces that erased them, sudden climate shifts, rising seas, erupting Earth, haven't gone anywhere. We just have better cameras pointed at them. These 10 disasters aren't really stories about death. They're reminders of how thin the line is, and always has been, between a thriving world and an empty layer of Earth. We survived, so far. And maybe the most human thing we can do is remember the ones who didn't.